get the speakers. Yuri, you know the speakers? Because I don't. No. I'm not that bad. The only speakers I can recognize is you and Paolo.
De nada. Great.
That's why I need to know who is Ukrainian speakers because I don't know them.
So, I'm going to do it the way you did.
Yes, you don't mind.
No, I don't mind. So, okay. So I'm just going to sit over here when I'm not up.
It's easier for me this way because jumping up and down.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine.
Good afternoon. It works. Unbelievable. Great. Let me then ask the speakers of the session to come forward to join the panel. All of you who speaks in the afternoon, please be so kind and proceed. I hope we have enough chairs. Are we all right? 6 people? 6 people. We need Oliksi Michalichenko. I'm sorry.
I'm used to it.
I'm sorry, I'm Polish, but still I can't figure out how to say it properly.
I know it's me when somebody goes me.
Okay, and Sergei Kostovich. That's the difficult one. Okay, we are missing. Oh, we are not missing. Very good. Rob.
So,
Floor to you.
well, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Elisa has asked me to be your Master of Ceremonies for this afternoon. The session that we have right now is helping us to reflect on public procurement as an element of modern public administration. And I think this is quite important because, as many of the speakers said this morning, successful implementation of the GPA certainly requires continuing effort at, I would say, professionalization of the procurement workforce, bringing public procurement administration into the broader mainstream of good public administration itself. So as our lead-off speaker on this topic, we're very fortunate to have Marian Lemke of OECD Civica. Marian, please go ahead.
Thank you, Robert, very much. Good afternoon. I'd like to discuss what I'm about to say from a bit different perspective. So my presentation will be on public procurement to discuss, let's say, a very general methodological framework that SIGMA and the European Commission is using to evaluate the progress of public administration reforms, but also to monitor and to guide them. So public procurement is part of this, but just part of this. So what I'd like to first present is a wider context of the public procurement reform. A very brief introduction of SIGMA. SIGMA is 25 years old. It's a joint initiative of the OECD and the European Commission, established in order to assist countries in transition to modernize their public administration systems in order to meet the EU entry criteria. So initially, SIGMA was established to assist countries like Poland, Hungary, again 25 years ago, to start and guide the reforms. And now we are using our experiences in wider context. We are still working with candidate and potential candidate countries, but also with European neighborhood policy countries, and Ukraine, of course, being one of our key countries. So we do provide a lot of, let's say, long-term assistance in government legislation, establishing institutions, and part of our work, and this is our latest product that was published just last month, is a very general guideline for public administration reform, so principles of public administration for ENP countries that somehow summarizes our experiences on how to organize, how to conduct reforms in transition countries, and on the other hand, how to monitor and how to evaluate. So the aim of the principles is to provide, again, guidelines and instruments for benchmarking for public administration reform that covers 6 core horizontal areas. Horizontal areas that those are the elements of how the public administration is organized that apply to actually every activity of public, so every sector of policy. So public procurement is part of this, is part of the last sector, public financial management, but actually all of those requirements would also apply to public procurement. So the public procurement in our methodology is part of public financial management, but to properly develop and implement public procurement policies, we need proper policy development and coordination mechanism that all ministries, all institutions responsible for making laws, monitoring them, should prepare properly policy drafts based on evidence, being properly consulted with all users. It's also obvious that all government policies, including public procurement policy, should be implemented by depoliticized civil servants, by properly trained professional civil servants, that all institutions should be accountable, and that the, let's say, ultimate goal is a proper quality of service delivery to citizens. But again, there are 6 areas. I'm not going to go into details of those. I'm going to focus just for a moment on public procurement. So this is our, what we formulate as a key requirement for a proper public procurement system in a country. Public procurement is regulated by duly enforced policies and procedures, ensures an independent, transparent, effective, and efficient remedy system, and is supported by suitable, competent, and adequately resourced institutions. So this is, we tried to put all important key words in one sentence. And actually, probably we could spend a whole day discussing every word used in this sentence. For example, today we did focus on just one, of course, key element, which is transparency. But as you can see, there are several other equally important elements that have to be met by a public procurement system to function properly. Then we formulate 3 key principles. And the structure of our methodology is that we go from the most general key requirements down to principles, then to more detailed sub-principles, and then we provide several benchmarks, several indicators, several objective, measurable indicators that aim at measuring how the system is implemented. So there are 3 principles in the area of public procurement. The first deals with the quality of legislation, so that public procurement regulations are aligned with internationally recognized principles of, as we discussed, Bob presented those principles today: economy, efficiency, transparency, openness, and accountability. I must say that those basic principles are more or less the same in every international public procurement regulation, and no need to mention, to remind that Ukraine is obliged to follow both GPA and following the EU association agreement, it's obliged to harmonize its legislation with next key principle refers to the quality of the review system. Again, the key requirement here is first of all independence, transparency, and rapidness and efficiency of the review system. Again, the main objective is that every dissatisfied tenderer would have the possibility to seek justice in a rapid way with an independent, impartial review institution. And finally, the last principle refers to the quality of implementation. So it both refers that all those basic principles of equal treatment, non-discrimination have to be applied in practice, and that contracting authorities are professional enough, staff and procurement officers have enough professional support to use modern procurement techniques. Then, as mentioned before, an integral important part of our methodology is a methodological annex that provides qualitative and quantitative indicators that enable, let's say, objective, independent measurement of the quality of the system. So this is an example of what could be achieved with Sigma methodology. This is a graphic representation of a recent review that we this year conducted in Moldova, a very comprehensive, detailed review of all public administration, all horizontal areas of public administration in Moldova, and you can see the grading system of the value benchmarking of Moldova in several sectors vis-à-vis candidate countries in the Western Balkans. And why I'm saying all of this, why I'm presenting this, because recently the European Commission has asked Sigma to conduct a similar exercise in Ukraine. So next year, Sigma will be analyzing in details again all those key elements of public administration of Ukraine, and at the end we should be able to compare how good is Ukraine vis-à-vis other countries of candidate countries and neighborhood countries. And so this is just a list of examples of indicators that we use for public procurement. Again, we try to focus not necessarily just on outcome indicators, but on impact indicators, in the sense to measure what change has been achieved in reality, in practice, by, for example, applying the electronic procurement system. And also we are trying to construct a whole set, so just a short list of a much wider representation of a much wider collection of indicators. So we avoid using just one single indicators. We rather try to use a complex set of indicators to be able to catch various aspects, again, of what impact has been achieved by a public procurement reform. And last but not least, again, the idea of this methodology is that it could be, first of all, used by Sigma, and this is what Sigma is regularly doing in accession countries, what we are starting doing in European neighborhood policy countries, but it could be also used independently, for example, for self-assessment, so using our methodology. And again, all those documents are publicly available on our website. For example, Ukraine can itself self-evaluate and conduct all this assessment. So, thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Marian. I think this is, I personally think it's quite useful and important for us to recall the point that you're making, which is that public procurement is part of the broader public administration system. And it's a very, very useful contribution. I think, I think it's obvious, and I tried to say that this morning, but for Ukraine's implementation of the GPA, WTO was counting on the input of all the partner organizations, and on our behalf, we salute actually what you do in this area. So our next speaker is Paolo, our colleague Paolo, who's known to most of us as well, I think, but he's going to speak on OECD governance, public procurement, performance indicators.
Not really.
No? Okay, well, anyway, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Robert. Well, I was requested to talk about what the modern public procurement system should deliver, but I see with surprise that in the agenda they put performance indicators, because I think it's also a relevant area. But this time I will try to talk about what a modern public procurement system should in fact deliver. And my first visit to Ukraine was almost 5 years ago. It was November 2011. And I was challenged by the BRD and Elisa at the time to come here to talk about e-procurement. Because at the time I was the president of the Portuguese Public Procurement Agency. And we have one of the most successful cases in the European Union in the use of e-procurement. And it's very interesting to see that after this time, Ukraine managed to achieve a very high level in the usage of e-procurement in order to enhance their public procurement system. Because e-procurement is one of the conditions to have a modern public procurement, and it's also an enabler for the public procurement system to achieve other objectives. And at the time, after the conference, we were going to see Kiev, and we had a car accident. So I spent my morning going from hospital to hospital here in Kiev, and that was my first contact with Kiev. And it was funny that one nurse, it was before the Euro Cup, and one nurse had training on English, and she was saying, if I knew that I would be using English so soon, I would have paid more attention to the training. And I'm sure that procurement officials will not say that about Prosoro, because everybody is aware of Prosoro, and Prosoro will be the standard. So I'm sure that you will hear no one saying this about the system here anymore. I would like to start by explaining to you what is the OECD, what we do, and then I will move to why public procurement matters. Everybody knows about it, but nevertheless, I think it's useful to reinforce it. And I will talk briefly about the OECD recommendation on public procurement, and I will finish by giving you some data on the strategic use of procurement that we advise countries to do, and also on the central purchasing bodies, some information, and our principle on efficiency. The central purchasing bodies, I understood from this morning that is going to be a priority here in Ukraine, and that's why, even before knowing that, I put it in the presentation as well. So the OECD, the slogan of the OECD is better policies for better lives. And the OECD is a forum where countries can compare and exchange policy experiences. So we provide a platform in Paris, and we try to get good practices from the countries in different policy areas, public administration, but also health, education, science, financial affairs, corporate affairs, any topic related to improving the quality of citizens' lives. And the OECD started by, after the Marshall Plan. It was, the organization was created to implement the Marshall Plan in Europe following the Second World War. And it expanded a lot since then. And now we are 35 countries. 2 weeks ago, Latvia joined the OECD. So it was the last member joining the OECD. And as you can see from the map, we go from New Zealand to Canada, from Chile to Korea and Japan. So we are covering all regions in the globe almost. And we are, of course, connected and always named as the most developed countries in the world. And, of course, our members represent a huge portion of the trade and GDP in terms of the world. We have also accession countries, and Costa Rica is now in the accession process, as we committees and working groups to discuss these policy issues that I mentioned before. The OECD is developing for some time now a thorough work on public procurement. And public procurement is a relevant topic, and we heard this morning that procurement matters, and procurement matters because it's a crucial pillar of strategic governance for any government body. And it's also the link between the public and the private sector. And as you know, it's a high-risk area. It's always mentioned as one of the most relevant high-risk areas. And in fact, according to the OECD foreign bribery report that analyzed 15 years of convicted cases in terms of international foreign bribery, 60% of these cases are related to public procurement. So if you see, in the last 15 years, in terms of all cases that the OECD analyzed related to foreign bribery, 2/3 are public procurement cases. So that shows the importance of public procurement. And also in terms of the OECD, we have 12% of the GDP in terms of public procurement, and roughly 1/3 of the government expenditures in terms of public procurement. 2/3 of this expenditure are done at the subnational level. So the subnational dimension is very important when we think of public procurement strategies. And sometimes governments, they tend to forget this subnational dimension, and they end up with strong central institutions, but lacking the capacity to go subnational, also because of constitutional issues sometimes. It's also interesting to see that public procurement matters also for the private sector, because according to our research and surveys, public sector efficiency is one of the most important business priority area for reform for the private sector. And we heard this morning that it's important to have stable legal frameworks. It's important to have the investors with trust in the countries. And that is something that you can only achieve if you have a sound public administration that is capable of showing that they respect international conventions, but also that they are capable of applying the rule of law, as Robert mentioned this morning. But more than that, they can provide the right environment for the investors and the private sector to develop. And it seems that Ukraine is moving into that direction. In terms of public procurement, we are developing a lot of work in several areas. I would like to mention briefly that we are contributing to one of the OECD flagship publications that is called Government at a Glance, that collects information about relevant topics for public administration across OECD and non-OECD countries. And we are coming up with the survey. We are launching the survey now for the next edition. It's every 2 years. The next edition will be 2017, and we are launching the public procurement survey now. We also work bilaterally with countries to help them developing their public procurement systems. For instance, we did a review of Korea or Colombia. We are working now with Peru and Chile. We are also supporting the European Union in improving the public procurement systems in some EU countries. And one of the topics that was mentioned this morning was professionalization. And in fact, in these countries, because the EU identified that they failed some of the ex-ante criteria for the application of structural funds, the EU asked the OECD to develop comprehensive projects that focus precisely on identifying the training gaps and then developing training materials and also training strategies to address these gaps and to train the trainers. We heard also this morning the importance of developing a good training strategy. At the same time, regarding this topic, we came up with a roadmap how to build a training strategy for the Middle East and North Africa region, but we believe it can be applied elsewhere. So I encourage you also to read this roadmap. And we, of course, we are supporting the G20. There was a slide that passed very quickly, which was the positioning of the OECD amongst the other international organizations. And the European Union, the BRD, the WTO was there, but also the G20. We are developing principles for the G20 coming up also with good practices in different areas, policy areas related to public procurement, for instance, green procurement, and now October this year we are going to launch a compendium on strategic innovation procurement. So for us, replying to the request, a modern public procurement system is a complex environment because it needs to deliver value for money, it needs to respect the legal framework, but at the same time it's required to have a broader strategic view about policy choices, and it needs to follow the government policy goals in other areas that at the first glance they have nothing to do with public procurement, but of course because of the size of procurement and because of the importance of public procurement, the governments use procurement a lot to achieve these, we call it secondary policy objectives. So it's more and more demanding for procurement officials to meet all these criteria and all these requirements. That's why enhancing the capacity is a key challenge in terms of developing a public procurement system. And this is part of the 5 key conditions that we identified for a successful, sound public procurement system. That includes, of course, institutions, rules and procedures, the human resources I mentioned, the contract management, but also e-procurement. And you will see that for us, the appropriate use of electronic tools is a key factor to have a sound procurement system. So, building on the experience of the OECD for the past, I would say, 5 to 10 years, the OECD decided to create an issue and adopt a recommendation on public procurement. And unlike the European Commission or other international organizations, our principles are not mandatory. They are soft law. They are, of course, adopted by the countries, the member countries of the OECD. They should follow these principles. It's the highest level of endorsement the OECD can have regarding a topic. And that's why the OECD Council, meaning the 34 at the time member countries, adopted this recommendation. As mentioned this morning, when you have members that are coming from different backgrounds and different perspectives, it's always a challenge to have them accepting commonly accepted principles. So for us it was also a challenge to have them accepting all these principles. Of course, the GPA was considered and the WTO as an international reference. It was not possible to put it in the text because of several considerations regarding some of our members, but some of our principles reflect precisely the need to treat foreign suppliers with consideration and to have a level playing field for them also in the domestic frameworks. So, well, basically it was building on the previous OECD recommendation for integrity, but now it's expanding much more, and we are covering the full scope of the public procurement cycle. And as mentioned also before by Marion and others this morning, public procurement is part of a broader system. And we are coming up with 12 integrated principles that are covering the public procurement cycle from A to Z, and including integration with public finance management. Of course, you have the integrity principles there, transparency, accountability, integrity, but also other principles related to efficiency or to access to the markets, to the evaluation and performance, and also the use of procurement to achieve other policy goals. So we believe that by applying this framework, it's possible for a country to improve their public procurement systems, and we encourage other countries besides OECD members to adopt this recommendation. I believe Ukraine is also interested at some point to adhere to the recommendation. It's a challenge because then we'll have to adopt our framework. But I heard last year when we met some of the Ukrainian officials that they were interested in adopting the recommendation. We have other countries also interested, like for instance Kazakhstan or Tunisia thing I would like to mention from this slide is that, of course, we have the policy instrument, which is the recommendation. We are doing work with countries, bringing us evidence and good practice and data. But we are also developing tools that are helping countries. And one of these tools that I would like to mention to you is the MAPS, which stands for the Methodology for Assessing Procurement Systems. It is something that was developed 10 years ago by the World Bank and the development community of the OECD to target developing countries only. But now the international community decided to expand the MAPS and to make it a commonly accepted tool for the assessment of procurement systems, in order also to reduce the burden of having international donors and organizations coming to the countries and doing assessment after assessment. So we are coordinating this group that is coming up with revised maps, and we will have a public consultation phase starting in July next month. And the idea is to have a tool that is accepted by everybody, from the World Bank to the Asian Development Bank, from the Inter-American to the Islamic, and from the European Union, the European Investment Bank, and so on. International donors like GIZ or USA. So we are having all these people working with us, and we are trying to reflect in the maps also the principles of the Sustainable Development Goals that were approved by the United Nations last year, and targeting all type of countries. So these new maps will be applied to OECD, non-OECD, developing, fragile economies, and so on. And one of the countries that we are thinking in applying the new maps for the testing is precisely Ukraine. Moving on, you have the presentation. I think it will be available. So I'm not going to spend much time in detail about the data. I'll just like to show you some figures about the way the OECD countries are using procurement to achieve other secondary policy objectives. For instance, in terms of green procurement, SMEs, or innovation. And you will see that moving from green is the secondary policy objective that is mostly used by countries through public procurement. Others, they are more challenging and more difficult to achieve, and we heard also this morning someone talking about, and I believe WTO will have these work programs that are addressing the strategic use of procurement. It's a challenge, and you will need to professionalize the procurement workforce. The EU mentioned that this morning as well. Genevieve talked about it. And it's a challenge also for other countries. It's not just something that will happen here in Ukraine. And you will see that in terms of the mandatory use of procurement, there are also differences. You need to have strategies, and you need to have impact assessment, and you need to have monitoring tools in place in order to verify if the systems are delivering what is expected from them. In terms of measuring the results, it's interesting to see that the countries are measuring the results, but if you move towards SMEs and innovation, they are measuring it less and less. I would like to focus a little bit on e-procurement, just a couple of minutes, to see that these are the functionalities that are provided in e-procurement systems across the OECD. And you will see that, for instance, tendering and provision, all countries are giving it. The electronic submission of bids also very high, notification of the award. Other areas are not so well developed. That's why when we hear the government of Ukraine saying that Prozoro is a state-of-the-art system worldwide, we tend to recognize that is in fact true, because even in the most developed countries, some functionalities are still not available. Also interesting to see that in terms of sectors, the use of e-procurement across the sectors is different. And you will see that, for instance, in the defense sector, they use more and more sector-specific e-procurement. So it was interesting to hear this morning that the Ministry of Defense is using Prozoro as a general system, which is, I think, a good practice. And finally, these challenges around the use of e-procurement systems, they are common to many countries. And if you see, we are talking about skills, and skills are changing the mindset to use e-procurement. Just briefly on the CPV, and I know that Ukraine is going to develop or thinking in developing a central purchasing body. We conducted this survey in 2014 about the use of CPVs across the OECD. You have here the way that the countries are using. We are supporting some OECD countries and EU members to set up central purchasing bodies and to develop strategies to improve it, like for instance we did it in Greece. It's interesting to see that only 4 OECD countries are not using CPV. And the roles of the CPV and the reasons to have CPV, you will see that the most important of them is to consolidate, so aggregate demand, but also to act as a contracting authority. Some other roles that are relevant is to the training part. You will see that in 36% of the cases, the CPV is used as a knowledge platform, and I think it will be a good approach here in Ukraine if you do something similar to what other countries did, like Colombia, for instance. They used the national agency, they developed the capacity, they improved very well the skills and the knowledge of the people that are working in the central agency, and then they managed to achieve, through the legal framework, access to the subnational level, and they also managed to change the law according to our recommendation to make sure that everybody in the country is using the same framework, the same templates, the same standard bidding documents, the same e-procurement platform, and that is something that per se will improve the capacity, because by having a common standard, you will be able to explain it better, and you will be able to train the people that are using the systems better as well. Okay, it's also interesting to see that the countries are not really measuring the impact of the CPV. So I advise Ukraine, if you are setting up a CPV, to consider a strategy to monitor the results, to make sure that you are able to communicate to the general public the pros and cons of using a CPV. The final ones, these are just a couple of slides to talk about how we see efficiency under the OECD recommendation. You have the presentation. I'm not going to enter into details, just by saying that we foster and we advise countries to use modern public procurement tools, like for instance the use of framework agreements, the aggregation of demand, the use of e-procurement tools. We believe that is the way to improve procurement systems and to fight many of the problems that the countries are facing, including, of course, issues related to transparency, but also to efficiency. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paulo. One thing that leaps out at me when I listen to these presentations is really that the issues in public procurement which you're facing in Ukraine, really all countries are facing the same issues. And we all have to work on these things, whether it's creating better remedy systems, whether it's ensuring high levels of integrity. All these are challenges. I've been to 60 different countries in my professional career, and I've never been to one that did not need to work on these problems. And I think the way to work on them is as a continuing process, not something that is going to be finished and then you're all done. So I think we have time, and thanks to our 2 speakers for helping us to catch up time-wise. We do have a few minutes for questions, and I would like to open the floor to you all for questions, to our 2 speakers. It's the post-lunch challenge. I know this very well, but it's okay. Question? If not, I will pose just one question. And Paulo, I noticed in the course of your presentation, and really this was also implicit, I would say, in Marion's as well, you referred a couple of times to the importance of useful, reliable, and comparable data for evaluation and improvement of our procurement systems. And and by the way, we very much share this concern in the WTO. And I would just like to ask you, do you think we are where we need to be on this point, the availability of data? And if not, what can we do to improve things? Do you want to conclude?
No, we are not. That's the easy part of the reply. Of course, we are not where we need to be. We are trying to come up with a comprehensive set of indicators, either related to the assessment of the system through the maps. That's one work stream. We will have qualitative and quantitative indicators under the maps to evaluate each dimension of the procurement system. That's one way to do it, and it's probably the easiest one. The other one is to develop key performance indicators that we are trying to achieve within the OECD countries to have a comprehensive and acceptable set of indicators, which is not easy because the countries are they have different systems. They are not capable of measuring and collecting the data. Some countries have legacy issues. Of course, newcomers like Ukraine or Georgia, it's easier to set up a set of indicators that are giving much of the information, but older systems and older countries that are not really into the procurement yet, it's more challenging. I would say with the new EU directives, it will be an opportunity to have it through across the EU at least, which will be already 20-something countries, 28, The initiatives like the open contracting and open data are relevant to make sure that the data sets are available for people to use. Gavin mentioned this morning we work with the Mexican airport, and they are, of course, targeting transparency and communication for these projects. But, for instance, the Mexican government has a wide initiative on opening the data and information, and then people can work on the data sets, and there are other initiatives like EDO, for instance.
I fully agree with Paul, of course. So the situation is not good in the sense that this is really a problem. We don't have good, reliable data, and this is both in, let's say, in the EU member states. Even despite the legal obligation to provide statistical data to the European Commission, simply the data is missing very often. But I would say the situation is rapidly improving in the sense that nowadays all institutions, all countries do understand the importance of statistical data as background for policy making, and we are better and better, especially we are now much better. I think it's due to the development of electronic instruments as well. So we are now much more aware about the scale of the procurement market. So we now more or less precisely know what and how much are we buying. We are still not good enough in measuring the efficiency of the system. We still do not have good benchmarks, performance indicators to measure how successful the system is, how the real savings are. All the instruments, methodologies to calculate the savings are somehow imperfect. But again, all institutions, OECD, Sigma, World Bank, European Commission are working very hard on exactly on developing objective measurable indicators to measure the quality of the public process.
Very good. Thank you very much, Marion and Paolo. And indeed, again, I think one purpose of this discussion is to identify common challenges, and I think all of our organizations, we see this as an important challenge to develop a much more solid footing in terms of empirical data. And we're working on this in our own way also in the WTO, and I think it's important that we share and sort of cross-fertilize ourselves as much as possible. Incidentally, by the way, I do want to say I think the OECD recommendation, which you mentioned, is a very, very useful tool. personally see, okay, it's not the same as the GPA, but actually to me the values that are behind it are essentially the same. And so I think it's a very, very useful reference point for implementing any procurement system. Okay, so thank you to both our speakers, and we've now switched the focus back to the experience in Ukraine. And we have two speakers who are going to address us next. The first is Mr. Andriy Motovlovets. Yes? Yes? Okay. Good.
That is going to be a long speech.
Я дуже прошу вибачення, але я буду розмовляти краще українською мовою, я не дуже гарно розмовляю. В грудні 2014 року ми з'явилися в Міністерстві інфраструктури, і одним із завдань це було подивитися на закупівлю нашого міністерства. Це я приніс вам одну закупівлю, яка була до системи прозора. Це ми отримуємо лист, наприклад, від посольства іноземної держави про закупівлю одного нашого підприємства, де найбільший виробник в світі не змог виграти тендер і запропонував найменшу ціну. Ми починаємо вивчати і вимагаємо нашого підприємства, будь ласка, покажіть нам документи. Це прислані документи до Міністерства інфраструктури. Вони всі прошнуровані, зняти копії. Я чекав ці документи 2 тижні. Поки я дивився ці документи, вже була акцепт торгів, вони вже отримали гроші, і я не зміг нічого зупинити. Якщо казати, як це виходить зараз, зараз тільки я розумію, що щось в тендері погано, за допомогою бім-модулю чи за допомогою звернення будь-якої особи, я відразу це бачу. Я заходжу в систему, відкриваю і бачу всі документи. Я не чекаю пояснень від своїх підприємств, я не чекаю купи документів, я можу проаналізувати, сказати і порадити нашому підприємству, що йому саме робити. Або змінити торги, або запустити по-новому процедуру, або змінити тендерну документацію. Щоб ви розуміли, що таке Міністерство інфраструктури України, слайди наступний. Міністерство інфраструктури – це 256 осіб з бюджетом $2 мільйони. Це наш годовий бюджет. Ми управляємо 250 підприємствами з загальним оборотом 4 мільярди. Ми не знали про це, коли приходили в міністерство. Це одне з перших відкриттів. Ми управляємо таким підприємством, як Укрзалізниця, 13 морських портів, Державна адміністрація морських портів, це утримувачі стратегічних об'єктів України. Ми керуємо підприємством, яке називається Укрпошта. І в загальному ми 4-й холдинг в Україні по обороту та по кількістю активів. В грудні місяці до нас прийшла нова команда Міністерства економіки. Вони ще не були Міністерства економіки, вони були волонтерами, як ми, і запропонували нам систему, показали, як вона може працювати. Це був березень 2015 року. Коли вони розповіли нам, як вона працює, я запросив до себе 5 підприємств, які є в Києві, і спитав, як ви купуєте зараз. Ми розмовляли з ними лише про порогову закупівлю, це до 5 мільйонів або до 1 мільйону гривень це товар. Коли я почав питати, як ви закупаєте, як ви працюєте, вони почали доповідати, що у нас є потреба, ми беремо цю потребу, у нас є надійні поставщики, 3 постачальники, і ми відправляємо факс. Вони відправляють факс до нас, ми бачимо найменшу ціну і підключаємо. Вони кажуть, добре, чудово. Коли ми сказали, що є можливість використовувати електронні торги, вони подивилися і сказали, що ми не знаємо, як це працюємо, але ми дуже просили їх, щоб вони підключилися і почали працювати. Ми провели аналіз і вийшло, що це сума приблизно 1 мільярд гривень на рік по нашим підприємствам. Після цього я зробив презентацію міністерству і показав, що є нова система, і ми видали наказ міністра про, ми рекомендували наші підприємства підключитися. Кожна нарада нашого міністра Піварського Андрія, другий виступав я, ми казали цим підприємствам, що є система Прозоро, є електронні торги, і ми дуже просимо вас підключатися і працювати з нею. Це було на протязі 1 місяця. Кожна нарада закінчувалась Прозоро, що ми будемо підключатися, подивитися, яка є гарна система. Ми видали наказ і ми постійно дивилися, як вони підключаються. Ми проводили аналіз. В березні місяці, 1 березня вийшов приказ, і наше підприємство підключалося так. В березні 3 підприємства, в квітні 25, в травні 32. Зараз у нас потужність приблизно 100 підприємств. Коли ми почали відкривати всі наші торгівлі на електронних площадках, ми бачили, що спочатку було в середньому 4 підприємства участі. Потім воно дуже впало до 2,18. Ми зрозуміли, що ми видаємо на ринок набагато більше заказів, ніж ринок навіть не може переварити. Вони навіть не знають, що це за система. Ми запустили постійні семінари для бізнесу. Ми почали їздити по нашим обласним до губернаторів і проводили дуже багато нарад. Коли ми просили наші підприємства підключити всі ті підприємства, які працювали з вами раніше через ПАЦ, ми не завжди їх бачили. Багато з них казали, що вони не вміють працювати в інтернеті, і ми зрозуміли, що ми почали розкривати інформацію набагато швидше, ніж бізнес бажав нам відкритися і прийти на наші закупівлі. Ми розуміли, що бізнес за 22 роки, по-перше, не знав, що у нас така кількість підприємств, що вони так багато закупають. І, щоб розуміли, ми вийшли на потужність 32 мільйонів гривень в день. Ми закупали від одягу до паперу, до устаткування дуже важкого і специфічного. Ми почали відкривати ринок, який був закритий для будь-якого середнього або малого бізнесу майже 22 роки. І зараз він повністю почав відкриватися. Це ще не було наказу, і одна з ідей міністерства це було піднімати всі помилки, які можуть бути в системі, до того, як вона буде законодавчо затверджена і почне реалізуватися. В березні місяці, коли ми підключили до системи Прозоро, я, як співробітник міністерства та міністра, почули дуже багато, що зараз зупиниться повністю всі кораблі, всі потяги перестануть їздити і дороги перестануть робитися. Дороги так і перестали робитися, але не без нас. Після підключення з підприємствами нічого не сталося. Вони всі працювали. Ми дуже просили бізнес приходити, і бізнес почав приходити до нас, і ми почали бачити, як сильно падає ціна від очікувань наших підприємств. Ми зрозуміли, що з бізнесом потрібно вести діалог. І ми зробили перші кроки. Це ми зробили на сайті Міністерства інфраструктури окремо розділ закупівлі і почали питати бізнес, що ви бажаєте бачити від нас, як міністерства, яке спрямовує діяльність наших підприємств. І коли ми з ними поспілкувалися, ми почали вони